This Friday, the 20th of October, is Developmental Language Disorder Awareness Day. It may not be something you've heard about, but it's certainly something that's more common than you expect. With me in the studio to talk about developmental language disorder is Ysanne Yeatman. Welcome to the studio.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Ysanne, can you tell us a little bit about your role, please?
So I can. So I'm the operational lead for speech and language therapy for Cornwall Partnership NHS Trust, and I have oversight of the speech and language therapy service. So we have 3 teams, East, Mid and West, and we support children that are 0 to 18 with speech, language and communication needs and also swallowing difficulties.
Oh, wow. So quite a varied role then.
Yeah, really varied caseload, very busy caseload. We have about 35 whole-time equivalent therapists across the county, but lots of people are part-time. So it's around 45 therapists, I say.
Amazing. So we're here to talk about developmental language disorder, otherwise known as DLD. What is DLD?
So it's quite a new term. It was previously known as specific language impairment, or SLI, and it's used to describe an ongoing significant difficulty people have with talking and or understanding language, so what other people say to them. And there's no real obvious cause for DLD. People often describe it as a hidden disability because it's not something you can immediately see or know about a person, and children with DLD are often very good at masking their difficulties, so they might watch others before kind of following the instruction themselves in the classroom.
Absolutely. How common would you say DLD is? I mean, it's more common than autism as far as I understand. It
is, and which is why we want to raise awareness of it. So it's very common. One study suggested 1 in 14 children had characteristics of DLD. We kind of think if it is 2 people in every classroom would have it, and it affects people all around the world. So it doesn't matter what language you speak. You could have DLD wherever you are, and that's one reason why the term DLD has we've been using it more, because everyone in the world has decided to call it the same thing, which we hope then will help people understand it more.
Great. And it's something that kind of persists into adulthood as well, isn't it?
It is. And we don't really know what causes it. We think it's probably subtle differences within the brain, possibly some genetic links, because siblings can also have it.
Right.
And it can co-occur with other neurodevelopmental difficulties like ADHD and dyslexia as well. Yeah.
So you work with children. How does DLD present in children, and how does it affect their school and everyday life?
So I suppose parents in the first instance might notice that the child doesn't talk very much, or might be using kind of immature language, maybe struggling to find the words they want to say, which can seem a bit frustrating, or maybe they don't quite understand instructions or following conversations. So in terms of its impact in school, it can have a huge impact if the right strategies aren't in place for the child or young person. So in the classroom, they might have difficulties following instructions, keeping up with the teacher talk. They might have difficulties kind of saying sentences that they need to, I don't know, if they're telling a story or explaining something about their topic book. They might have difficulties understanding vocabulary or choosing the word they want to say. And then it can impact socially, because obviously having conversations with your friends, particularly as you get a bit older, and there's lots of nuanced things like sarcasm and jokes, it can be hard to kind of keep up with the social aspects of language as well.
It can sometimes appear as though it's a behavioural issue when it's not.
It can, and I think that's really important why everyone knows about it as well. Obviously, if you're not understanding things, or you're feeling left behind in the classroom, or you're not certain why people are getting it and you don't, that can be really frustrating. Also the opposite, sometimes children with DLD can kind of withdraw into themselves, and they don't want to have a go because they're not feeling very confident that they're going to get it right as well.
Yeah. How can you support children with this diagnosis?
So lots of different ways to support. We place a really huge focus, particularly in schools, about creating a communication supportive environment. So again, placing the emphasis on us as kind of supporting adults to make modifications. So that could be lots of visuals. So I guess if instructions are being given, making sure they're kind of written down or supported with pictures. If, they have to write a story about their work, giving the children a chance to kind of plan it in kind of visual tools like boxes. Generally, we find children with DLD have got loads of visual strengths. So if you kind of make language visual, you kind of represent it, they're like, yes, I've got it, I understand. And also, as adults, making sure we're giving lots of people time to process the information, getting their attention before we might say an instruction, and checking they've understood, but explaining it in their own words, so they don't just go, yeah, I've understood, when they might not. And obviously direct speech and language therapy can help at certain times in children and young people's lives, particularly those explicit teaching of the rules around language and grammar. There's some good evidence for certain programs that you can use to support, but the main thing, if the child's having direct speech and language therapy, is always having one of their communication partners there, so they can do all the work in between, because it's such a small amount of time they might see a speech and language therapist.
Yeah, amazing. What are some of the strategies that children can learn to kind of help themselves process day-to-day language? So
we do a lot on self-advocacy, so kind of knowing what you need and how to get it in a way that's assertive. So a lot of that is asking for help when you need it. So that could be asking for instructions repeated, getting someone to say things a little bit slower, getting someone to show it you in a different way, or literally physically show you how to do something. So really building their confidence and also their understanding about why they might need to do that more than, say, their peers that don't have a diagnosis of DLD. Obviously, as they go towards their GCSEs, maybe doing some different types of study strategies, like making mind maps might help, using their phone to take pictures of notes rather than having to like scribble it all down, which can be really effortful for them. And obviously, we mentioned that DLD does go into adulthood. So also, adults with DLD might need to ask their employers for reasonable adjustments, so extra time to complete tasks. Again, tasks written down in step-by-step order, making needs to happen really clear.
Quite often with children with DLD, then they learn these strategies to help them in their adult life.
Yeah, and really effectively. And often, again, that's a real goal of either speech and language therapy, or it could be, a goal on an IEP or an EHCP about actually, what do I know about my own strengths and weakness, as a child or young person with DLD, and what are my strategies I can do that in this moment, if I get stuck, I know what to do and I feel confident about it. Great.
So there's always some way of working through and getting to the goal that you want to achieve.
Exactly. I would say there's a really good website called This Is DLD, and it's made by a young person with DLD. She's called Ellen, and it's very much from her perspective and what she's like, well, this is what was really helpful when my teachers did this. This was less helpful. And that's when we always share in the speech and language therapy service, because it's just really nice because it's in her words, so it's nice and simple. Yeah, if you Google This Is DLD, it should pop up.
Well, thank you. So if you as a parent are concerned about your child and how do you get a referral to the speech and language team?
Yeah, so we have a completely open referral system, which is really good news because not all counties and stuff have that. So we're really proud of that in Cornwall. So an open referral just means anyone can refer in. So a nursery could, a school, a parent, anyone that's concerned, a health visitor. And we have a portal on our website. So again, hopefully, if you Google speech and language therapy, Children's Cornwall will pop up, and it's called Request for Help. And you fill in the portal, kind of just child's details, what you're worried about, and it goes through to our Request for Help team, and a qualified speech and language therapist books in a phone consultation, and then we decide whether, you definitely need to come onto the community caseload for a bit more support, or whether there's things that maybe the school could try, because there's lots of training about DLD. If they're a little bit younger, maybe just some general activities before they need to see a speech and language therapist. But we're always here to help if people need it.
Is there anything else you'd like people to know about developmental language disorder?
I'd very much like to emphasise that there's lots of strengths, and I think it's really important we focus on people's strengths. And I was saying to you before we started, I used to work in a language unit for teenagers with DLD, and their skills in things like sport, art, music, just comedy, were amazing, and that's what we were always able to kind of harness as they went to do their GCSEs or onto colleges or apprenticeships, what's ever appropriate for their level of, need and aspirations, really. Really caring. Lots of them went to work in nurseries and stuff for their work experience, so that's what I'd really like, because whilst there's some real significant difficulties with language that do create massive barriers to education, and if there's not strategies in place, I think it's always important to think about strengths and where people want to go to in the future.
That's really great. Thank you so much, Ysanne, for your time today.
Thank you for having me.